Hey guys. Okay, so we're going to run through two of the four new forms. We're going to go through the CVA as well as the NUCC. They work together. So let me open up zip forms. I think you guys mostly use it online, so we'll use that. Okay. All right, so now first let's run through what an amendment is, what an addendum is. So an addendum is really just more of an attachment to a contract. And an amendment is to change the terms of the existing contract. So, just like regular, we have an addendum 1, 2, 3. We also have an AEA form amendment. So that's really if you need to change something that's already agreed on. And so that's why this form kind of serves as both. One is if you're attaching it to the contract, like a brand new contract, you're going to be using this as if it's an addendum. And then the other version of this is if it's being used as an amendment of an existing contract. So it's significant because a couple things. One, how you fill it out and use it, but also two is if the other party accepts it or not. So for instance, let's say you have a contract you typed up yesterday. So it's an existing contract. So we're going to be attaching this to an existing contract purchase agreement dated yesterday. Now, because everybody has signed and everybody has agreed to it, now we're presenting this as an amendment, which means we're going to check this box because it's it's amending some terms of an already accepted agreement. Now, the reason this is a big deal is because now that we're presenting it to the seller, if we were typing this up for a buyer, the seller is not required or obligated to accept this. So we're going to hope that they're going to accept this. Or if the seller is typing this up, they're going to hope that the buyer accepts this. So if you're doing any sort of new contracts, especially for a buyer, because pretty much these forms mostly protect buyers, not always, but mostly. So if you're typing up any new contracts, I really want you guys to attach it to the new contract, because if that's the case, you're going to be, let's say, typing up the contract today. You're going to leave this blank because it's not an amendment. It's being used as an addendum right now. The reason it's significant, when you type up the contract in section 5, I believe, where you're marking what you're attaching to the contract, you're going to mark other and you're going to type in CVA. That means that the seller cannot accept the contract without also accepting this addendum as being part of that contract. So they might counteroffer it, but they will at least acknowledge that it's being part of the contract upfront from day one, rather than you getting in a contract and then later hoping to get the other party to sign and accept this. So that's the difference between it being either an addendum or an amendment. So let's really quickly run through what it means. So you know how to fill out the top. Obviously, it's being attached to the purchase agreement, dated whatever day the purchase agreement is. And then you check this if it's an addendum or an amendment, sorry. So section 1, it basically just describes what is going on, the pandemic that's going on. And then it describes that there could be some unforeseen circumstances related to the coronavirus. And so that just kind of sets the tone of what that is. Now, number 2, it says that this form is used to address those situations if they come up. It is optional. It is not required that either party sign this and agree to these terms. And basically the point of this form, one is it kind of sets expectations and sets the tone. And it also is really meant to resolve any disputes that could potentially come up over something related to the virus, whether it's a delay and a health issue that's causing somebody not to be able to buy or sell, or just any sort of delay in general. And so number 2 kind of describes what the form is intended for, right? So number 3, if this is signed by both parties, then it's actually it has set the tone for something potentially to happen. So if something actually does happen to cause a buyer or seller not to be able to perform, whether that means they can't buy or they just can't fulfill their contractual obligation or duty by a specific time noted in the contract, then a notice has to be given to that other party that something did happen, it actually did happen, and then the NUCC form is going to be how you notify the other party. And so down here where it says at the end of section 3 where it says NUCC is attached, you're not checking that unless you're drafting this CVA along with an NUCC specifically to cancel a contract. If that's what you're doing, then you will check that and you'll be canceling the contract, or just use a cancellation of contract form if everybody agrees. So you're not going to be checking this box right here. Okay, so now we've set the tone for, hey, if we all sign this CVA, everything's fine today, let's sign this CVA. But if there is something that comes up and we have to invoke these terms and we have to use the NUCC, what exactly are we asking for at that time if it happens in the future? Well, there's a few things you can ask for. You can ask for extension of contingencies, extension of time to close escrow, or mutual cancellation. So we're not using C, again, unless our intention of typing this is to 100% cancel at that moment, then you're going to click C. So we're going to ignore C for now. Typically what you're doing, if you're using this just to set the tone in case something happens, you're going to be working with A or B, or ideally both. So A says that if something were to happen, we don't know what it is, we want to have the option to be able to give you an NUCC and extend the time for the buyer to remove contingencies up to 30 days. Which contingencies? I don't know, maybe all of them, because we don't know what's going to happen, right? And since we're going to be asking for up to 30 days, let's say we're going to only make it 25 days. We're competing with another offer. We want to make ours look better. We'll possibly need a 25-day extension. Well, if we're going to have a 25-day extension on contingencies, we're probably also going to need a 25-day extension of closing of escrow, or maybe 20, right? But you can't not extend the close of escrow, but extend the contingencies 25 days, because most likely you'll run into a situation where you have an extended closing and closing date is coming up even before your contingencies are removed. It makes no sense. So usually you're going to be clicking A and B and making this make sense. So either leave it as 30 days or type in a different number, whatever number you want to put in there, or your buyer wants to put in there. I'm saying buyer is doing all this because most likely it's the buyer that's going to benefit from the CVA form and the NUCC, but not necessarily. Why would a seller benefit? Well, let's say the seller is selling their property, but they're also buying a replacement property. If something happens to that house, or something, if something happens coronavirus related and they can't purchase that house, they want to be able to get out of this sale too, or at least ask for an extension, because then that's going to be putting them in a bad situation where they can't sell because of something specific related to the virus. So that's why it also makes sense for a seller. So you guys have to kind of understand what the point of this form is so that you can explain it to your seller, whether it's a good or bad thing, if it even applies to them, if they think that there's going to be a situation where they might not be able to sell, and also explain to your buyer how this protects them. Doesn't make their offer look great, doesn't look great to a seller, but it protects them. And if they are worried about buying because what if something happens? Well, hey buyer, you might still look at, buying because interest rates are low and we found these houses that you like. And I know that that's a concern for you, but this form addresses that concern. So even if we're doing everything and last minute you lose your job or you get cut, your hours get cut, this form will protect you. So you're not actually losing your deposit, you're not breaching your contract. So if that's a concern of your buyers and they're saying, oh, we want to wait a few months, maybe show this to them and show how this protects them and how you can negotiate that it gets accepted. So again, the whole point of this form is to kind of set the tone for if something were to happen, everybody understands that, something might happen. This is what we'll ask for if it happens, okay? Now, if it happens, again, you type up the NUCC form. So what is the NUCC form? It's the notice that kind of comes after that CVA form. If you'll see, in accordance with the terms and conditions of the CVA form dated, whatever date you dated the CVA form, that's what goes here, not the contract form, the CVA form, that the affected party gives notice to the other party per that form. So let's say the buyer is giving notice. The buyer's lender has a huge delay in underwriting. It's going to take 2 weeks. Okay, so this is how you fill it out. You say the buyer is giving notice to the seller. And what is the issue here? Is it a personal impact? Is it a stay-at-home government restriction that maybe they can't get into the property? What is the issue? Well, in this situation, it was actually just simply a lender delay to unforeseen coronavirus circumstance. So if you give this notice to the other party, what we asked for in the CVA, which was potentially 30 days of an extension of the loan contingency, that'll take place. We don't have to beg the seller for a 30-day continuation of that contingency because they already agreed to it with that CVA form. So this is what this is. Now down here, we have to also attach or type out the verification. So if there really truly is a lender delay, then down here, you're gonna somehow write, you know, the lender has underwriting issues and blah, 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 and you're gonna type it out here. The buyer is going to be writing all of this, and then the buyer signs below, and they are signing it as an affidavit that they are swearing it is true. They cannot lie on this, and we can't lie because even though our duty is to our buyer in this situation, we still have a duty to be honest and fair with the other party. So we can't use this as like, oh, the buyer just wants an extra 30 days just to decide if they want to do this or not. There's no such thing. So there is proof that has to be given, and that's just reasonable. So if it's maybe a letter from the underwriting department or a letter from the lender, you're going to just simply check the box that says attached and attach that, and then that'll protect your buyer. They've given enough proof, everything like that. So that's if there's a delay, you need something like that. Let's say it wasn't a lender delay. Let's say it was because of the ordinance, we couldn't get the home inspector and the appraisal done. So the buyer is saying, these are the issues that came up. Again, attach some sort of proof from the appraiser and the home inspector. And what happens if you submit this? The same thing, the 30 days extension or 25 days extension on the contingency. Now, let's say it was more severe than this. Let's say it was a personal issue that came up where the buyer or the buyer's family or something had some sort of quarantine requirement, doctor wouldn't let them leave, or they actually were diagnosed positive. They would fill out whatever applies here. And guess what? They again have to attach proof down here in section 2. So whatever the situation is, this kind of gives you a huge list of things that possibly could go wrong, which the buyer or the seller would give a notice to the other party. Again, if the CVA has been agreed upon, which protects the parties. So let's say it was really the seller. The seller is giving a notice to the buyer that the seller has a delay or the seller has to cancel. Well, let's say the seller is now giving the option to the buyer, and it was because the seller was confirmed positive and they no longer want to sell and it's causing them a lot of issues. They can't leave their house, blah, blah, blah. They would put that in here along with proof to the buyer, and the seller would be allowed to cancel. So by doing this, they don't have to, let's go back to the CVA because these two obviously work together. So if this is done and you're extending contingencies or you're extending closing, there's no demand to close escrow or notice to perform. None of that is going to apply during that time period. If you asked for an extension of closing and it comes down to it, they're not going to give you a demand and keep your deposit. It's just going to be able to be canceled. So this is making things really lenient. Again, more so in the favor of a buyer, but it still could benefit your seller. But regardless, you should understand how it affects your sellers because you'll have to explain this anyway. So I think that pretty much sums it up. So make sure you guys are getting the CVA signed on all new contracts typed up. When you have a listing, present this to your seller because this is something that will be given to you when you're getting offers. So let your seller know in advance what this is and what to look for so that they kind of know what to expect. And yeah, so get this on all of your current contracts as well, especially if you guys have buyers. I would type this up. I have a buyer right now. Last week I typed this up for him, And because they updated it, I typed the second one up for him as well, and I sent that over, and I've been getting the sellers to accept both versions of this. So maybe they weren't understanding what it was, but now my buyer is protected because he works at Gallo. If something were to happen, which I don't think it will with his job, but if something really does happen and he needs an extension, or his lender needs an extension, or he just needs to cancel, he is protected basically to the last minute now if something happens virus related. He'll have to show proof, but he's protected now, and I've done my job as a buyer's agent. So please, you guys, run these scenarios by me if you're not sure if you even should do it, even if you're last minute in your contract and you think it's going to close tomorrow or early next week. Let's talk about it. Maybe this is something that would benefit you guys. When I say you guys, I mean your clients, which again, we're trying to avoid liability on us for not presenting this to them. So please do so. Let me know if you guys have any questions.